The crimes didn't happen all at once. They unfolded over time in different locations with different victims. This timeline became a puzzle that investigators struggled to piece together for decades. The story of the Zodiac Killer is defined by a small number of confirmed attacks, all spread across Northern California between the winter of 1968 and the fall of 1969. Each of these incidents occurred in a distinct setting, targeting different people. Yet, when viewed together, they formed the terrifying foundation of one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American history. To understand the mystery, we have to start with the facts and follow the trail as it first appeared. It all began on December 20th, 1968, on a dark, secluded stretch of Lake Herma Road near Benicia. A young couple, David G. Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, were on their first date. They parked their car in a well-known Lovis Lane turnout. Sometime after 11 p.m., another car pulled up beside them. What happened next was sudden and brutal. The couple was shot and killed outside their vehicle. When law enforcement arrived, the scene was quiet, and there were no immediate witnesses who could offer a clear description of the attacker or their car. At the time, investigators treated the attack as a tragic but isolated act of violence. There was no note, no message, and no apparent motive. It was a crime shrouded in darkness. The first piece of a puzzle nobody knew was being assembled. For 7 months, the case went cold. Then, on the night of July 4th, 1969, in Vallejo, about 4 miles from the first crime scene, another couple was attacked. Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were sitting in their car at Blue Rock Springs Park when another vehicle pulled in behind them, its headlights blinding them before it drove away. A few minutes later, the car returned. A man approached their vehicle with a flashlight and a handgun and opened fire. Darlene Ferrin was killed, but Michael Mageau miraculously survived. Just 40 minutes after the attack, the Vallejo Police Department received a chilling phone call. A man with a calm, rehearsed voice claimed responsibility not only for the Blue Rock Springs shooting, but also for the murders on Lake Herman Road the previous December. For the first time, investigators began to consider a horrifying possibility. These were not separate incidents. They were connected. A serial killer was on the loose, and he wanted credit for his work. The attacks grew bolder and more bizarre. On September 27, 1969, the terror moved to the serene shores of Lake Beressa in Napa County. A college couple, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, were relaxing on a picnic blanket by the water when they were approached by a man wearing an unusual executioner-style hood. He carried a gun and a knife. Unlike the previous attacks, which were swift and silent, this time the killer spoke directly to his victims. He claimed to be an escaped convict from a prison in Montana or Colorado and said he needed their car and money to get to Mexico. He tied them up before stabbing them repeatedly. He then walked over to Brian Hartnell's car and drew a circle with a cross through it on the door, along with the dates of his previous attacks and the current one. Again, one victim survived. Brian Hartnell lived to describe the attacker's costume and demeanor in chilling detail. The symbol left at the scene marked a significant shift. The killer was no longer just committing crimes. He was creating a persona, a brand. Just 2 weeks later, on October 11th, 1969, the final confirmed Zodiac murder occurred, this time in a completely different environment. The killer targeted a taxi driver named Paul Steen in the affluent Presidio Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. Unlike the secluded lovers' lanes, this was a residential street. After shooting Stein, the killer was seen by several witnesses, including teenagers across the street who called the police. An initial police dispatch mistakenly described the suspect as a black man, causing responding officers to drive right past a white man seen walking away from the scene, a man who may have been the Zodiac. The killer then took a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt. This act was not random. A few days later, a letter arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle. It contained a piece of the blood-soaked fabric as proof, along with a taunting message and a threat to attack a school bus. The shift to a major city, the close call with police, and the use of physical proof sent a wave of panic across the Bay Area. When investigators laid out the timeline of these 4 attacks, they saw both patterns and perplexing differences. The victims were young couples in 2 cases, but a lone male taxi driver in the last. The locations ranged from isolated rural roads to a busy urban neighborhood. The methods of attack included both shooting and stabbing. The inconsistencies made it difficult to build a consistent profile of the perpetrator. But what did remain consistent was the killer's escalating desire for public attention and acknowledgement. From a silent attack, to a phone call, to leaving a symbol, and finally to mailing physical evidence to the presaged crime was a performance. The common thread was not the act itself, but the communication that followed. Establishing this confirmed timeline became the single most critical task for the investigation. It was the bedrock upon which the entire case was built. This sequence of events from December 1968 to October 1969 allowed authorities to test alibis and narrow down the vast pool of potential suspects. If a person of interest couldn't have been at Lake Herman Road on that specific night, they were less likely to be the killer. The timeline also helped them assess which of the many subsequent letters and phone calls could be reliably attributed to the same individual. But even with a confirmed timeline, deep uncertainty remained. The killer claimed many more victims in his letters, but law enforcement could never concretely link him to any other crimes, leaving the true scope of his violence a mystery. The confirmed Zodiac Killer left behind a fragmented series of terrifying crimes, a bloody trail connected by time, location, and, most importantly, communication. It was this communication that elevated the case from a local police matter to a national obsession. In the next episode, we will dive deep into the mind of the killer by examining his most famous legacy. The letters and ciphers he sent to the media, the cryptic messages that taunted police and captivated the world. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of the story.